Hi friends, hopefully I will have got organised enough to put this over onto my Survivor channel, Angie Parra Disney. Just a quick blurt, you know, and I do try and put some good news comedy clips up sometimes, but it's not always that way. And so just a few things I want to cover. I'm glad I got honest about still wrestling with alcohol addiction and cigarettes, although I realise I'm not as committed to total abstinence from nicotine, which some regard as the gateway drug of all gateway drugs. I've smoked since I was 11. What's that? 51 years. Yeah, 62, yeah, 51 years, half a century. But I certainly like the idea of quitting cigarettes, but alcohol definitely is not my friend anymore. So I'm glad I was honest about that in my September update, although I was just cringing with shame and guilt and unworthiness for a few days after making that, but it was worth it for the amount of people that reached out to me. So some people reached out to me, born again Christians as I am, saying don't go back to Catholic rehab and there has to be a born again option in Ireland and you know, you're under the wrong covering and all the rest of it. And I'm open to that. And I've done some research, but I've found that basically there's almost nothing Christian in terms of residential units for women in Ireland. There's Tiglin, there's 2 or 3 that are on the model of the Youth with a Mission, which is kind of word of faith, a little bit suspicious of that whole movement now, although there's always good people. But Tiglin, I went and checked out years ago, and it's a year program, and I'm just not ready to take a year out. And also when I was there, it was, I think the house only houses maybe 4 or 6. And they were mostly in their 20s with heroin addiction recovery, which is admirable, but I just felt a bit like a fish out of water. And the other option was Cool Mine, which is not a Christian place, and based on what I've heard from others that have been there, no, I don't think I'm not quite rigorous enough to live on 30 euros a week and 5 cigarettes a day or something. You know, and commit to a year or something. I'm not, I do want to spend the rest of my days sober. I think that's just something that's happened is, and the other question I've been looking at is because Andrew, thank you for your insight, talking about child sexual abuse and MK Ultra survivors self-medicating. And I'm taking another look at having come off Ritalin. Like I definitely jumped on the train of, you know, anti-big pharma, anti-vaccines and you know, I'm definitely in principle against those things, but also in experience at 62, having raised 3 children and survived myself, I've realized that there are circumstances where surgery or medication are appropriate. I came off Ritalin. I was on quite a high dose, 72 milligrams of Concerta daily for ADHD. And I was functioning pretty well. I wasn't drinking much or, you know, having months of abstinence and, you know, not in trouble so much really with it. But since I came off, and I'm not blaming it on the dog, you're so naughty, Ruby. So attention seeking when I'm broadcasting. Sit. Good girl. Yeah, I came off Ritalin in 2016, gained 50 pounds and doubled my drinking and smoking. And they may be unconnected. It may not be anything to do with the Ritalin, but I'm definitely going to go and have another consult and say, look, you know, has my self-medicating accelerated? Is that connected to the fact that, you know, that I discontinued pharmaceutical help for brain pathways that were permanently damaged through childhood trauma. So I'm taking a look at that. So I think I'm back to the drawing board. The other option I was offered was England. And I don't think I'd like to run into the likes of Steve Martin or all the dirty bent Freemason cops running around at the behest of Ricky Dearman and Karen Irving over there. I don't think I'll take that chance. I like to take risks, but maybe that's a bridge too far. But there are residential rehabs for women in England, much more than Ireland. So I think it's back to the Catholic drawing board. You know, and the nice thing, I spent half an hour on the phone with today on the phone with a born-again Christian talking about the option of, you know, Christian rehab as opposed to Catholic. And I said to her, you know, I wonder if, like, I've come out worse than I went in, and I'm wondering if that was because I was under a Catholic covering and I shouldn't have been. You know, whether there's any demonic attachments or, you know, whether I opened doors that I shouldn't have. And she pretty much said, you know, the covering of Jesus works wherever you are. And the drinking itself opens portals and doors for strongholds. This is all jargon that some people might not understand. But anyway, so I'm still on the waiting list to go back into the Catholic convert, which will have me in there over Christmas and possibly freezing. It's boot camp, it's not a holiday, but look, it's there's more good than bad to be said about it. And the other thing I just wanted to check in on is I've been following this latest round of the royal independent inquiry into child sexual abuse going on in England. It's costing tens of millions. It's taking years. It's on its fourth leader, having been maliciously delayed by Theresa May and others. And it's been depressing and excruciating to watch for this last 10 days. They're looking at institutional child abuse. This last week and this week is on focusing on special schools. So, you know, music schools or dance schools, residential schools for children, and how there's a very high incidence of sexual abuse in them. And a statistic that was put out was disabled children are 3 times more likely to be sexually abused in care. Absolutely horrendous. There have been a couple of dramatic moments, shocking moments. It's still leaving me shaking my head, which is why I'm making this video. There was a headmaster who thought it was appropriate. One boy reported being bullied, another boy ejaculated on his bed in the dorms. And this boy reported it as bullying behaviour, which is absolutely right. And the headmaster took all those year 9 boys, I imagine they were about 12, into his own private accommodation, gave them all Coke and crisps, and sat them down for a chat. Thank God one of those children was clever enough to record. And what was recorded as advice by a headmaster to prepubescent boys in his care beggared belief. I don't know why that man's not in jail. He advised them that pornography in boarding school was so normal that you could open 5 libraries, porn libraries, based on the material that he was exposed to in his boarding school experience. He advised the boys not only was masturbation normal, but they could, you know, masturbate each other, but just do make sure the other chap agrees. You know, it could get messy, it could get complicated. But if I walked through the dorms and saw 2 of you masturbating each other, you know, I would turn a blind eye. Just along those lines. And this guy was on the stand trying to defend that. Oh, And he advised the boys that not only was masturbating, including each other, and pornography an absolutely normal part of their boarding school experience, but that anybody who disclosed would be considered a bully. So anybody who whistle blew and said, I'm uncomfortable, I'm feeling unsafe and violated, and they can't find those words at that age, but I don't like this, that person will be, and the headmaster said this in his recorded speech to the children, why is he not in jail for endangering of young people under his care in a position of trust? Why is he not in jail? So as he blustered through his evidence, and the barrister did a middling good job of bringing it to light, there was a drama. And something that they do with IICSA, they claim to live stream it to the public, but they actually have it on a 3-minute delay. And so if there's an incident, they just take the live stream down, which happened towards the end of this headmaster's evidence, where he tried to say, he did a nice thing and he was just, helping the boys along. There was also a school teacher gave evidence and said she was given similar advice, that not only should little indiscrepancies of sexual abuse amongst the children or by staff to the children, not only should that be kept within the school grounds, but anybody that took it outside of the school chains of command would also be considered to be a bully and a traitor. And it was this, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, what happens in boarding school stays in boarding school, what goes on in the dorms stays in the dorms. It was so patently obvious that adults were breaking the law. There was another headmaster, these live streams, sometimes they just disappear off YouTube, but they should be still up there. There was another headmaster defended what happens in boarding school stays in boarding school. And this headmaster that was recorded telling the children they could masturbate each other and pornography was perfectly normal, and anybody who discloses what goes on in the dorms is regarded as a traitor and a bully. And then when the parents got hold of the recording and attempts were made to report it, this head of the Board of Governors, or whoever he was, allowed that headmaster to retire early with another 8 months full pay and a healthy pension, and nothing on his record, just saying he retired early on health grounds. So there was a teacher, whistleblower teacher, tried to get the appropriate actions taken, and she was basically drummed out of her job. So that headmaster that had given this, I would suggest, illegal, endangering, criminal, perverted advice to the children in his care, his interview ended suddenly. So he was getting a little bit heated, a little bit agitated, a little bit exposed, and then all of a sudden the live stream went down. And when it came back up an hour or so later, the barrister said, oh, by the way, just to remind you all, there is a recording restriction as to the unfortunate incident earlier. And that was that. Also, I think it may have been the same headmaster, it may have been a different one, but one that was lying. Some of the witnesses last week provably lied on the stand. Why aren't they arrested? Perjury under oath. And a brave survivor shouted out in the court hearing. She just shouted, you did know, you absolutely did know. Why are you lying? Because he had been told by parents, he'd been told by children, survivors, victims, he had been told over and over again that they were getting sexually abused in the school setting by an adult. And the headmaster denied, I think 7 teachers from this residential music school, 7 teachers have been convicted of child paedophilia and gone to jail. And the headmaster was saying that, no, he had no recall of any pupils or parents approaching him. He knew nothing about it until it all came to court in 2013. And one survivor said, you're lying, you're lying. And the barrister, instead of empathizing with the student, knowing full well this adult was lying under oath, live streaming to a pathetic audience of 45 or 50 people when it should be on the BBC, uninterrupted every day from 10 till 4. She said to him, oh, please ignore that interruption. You don't have to answer that question. And his response was, oh, but I feel I do. I'm so shocked at being talked to like that by a pupil. And he was more offended in his sense of hierarchy and power. He was more offended that a pupil, past pupil, victim, spoke out of turn against protocol in the court. He was more offended by that than he was by the fact that she had been abused under his care. He had been told repeatedly he had covered up for the abusers, and then he lied about that on the stand. So he was more offended at her kicking against the hierarchy and addressing the ex-headmaster disrespectfully than he was with the failings that should have had him also behind bars. And I will try and do a list of recommendations at some point. I'm going to finish watching this if I can bear it. It makes me sick to my stomach. It depresses me. They just keep wheeling out professionals, suits, academics and baronesses and coppers to say how many lessons they've learned and how everything's changed now. You know, how about you cut out pornography? How about you teach children about heterosexual marriage relationships? You know, how about you steer them away from perversion? And how about children just are not? How about homeschooling for people, really? You know, my children went to boarding school for a few years, and I was hyper vigilant about any of this kind of thing. And I do believe they were fortunate enough not to have been abused. And I went to great lengths to ensure that it was just a weekly boarding school, so Monday morning till, you know, Friday afternoon kind of thing, and they'd come home one day in the week for training with that, or maybe 2 nights in the week they'd come home. But it was only up the road. But oh God, it was so devastating. I've heard so many survivor stories, children that are put in care because their mother died, or something happened. They had undiagnosed learning difficulties or ADHD. You know, they might have stolen something in a shop and then get fed into a child trafficking, child raping, boy brothel, you know, boy and girl brothel situation, supply line for elite paedophiles. Mr. X, Bruneston, Dolphin Square, etc., etc., etc. Beach Hall, Shirley Oaks, Nottingham, Edgware Road, you name it. So, yeah, that'll do for now. It's not a very upbeat one, and as I say, I'll try and put this on my Survivor channel. Tomorrow is the Day of Atonement. You know, it's an opportunity to fast and pray for 24 hours, starting from about an hour when it gets dark. You know, we're not saved based on our own fasting and praying and repenting. We're saved because of Jesus, because we've come to Jesus and said, you know, I'm a sinner, and I accept your gift of having died for my sins once and for all, final, ultimate, no more needed sacrifice. But it's still a good thing to do, to take maybe at least a day in the year to say, where have I fallen short in the past year? Where could I do better going forward? You know, what responsibility can I take for falling short in my lifetime? And I would ask people especially to pray for Mummy T, you know, who devastatingly went back north with her baby under the advice of Tracy Morris, and Thursday is due in court to free her baby for adoption, which she doesn't want to do. But she has been horrendously let down by Lisbon social services, blackmailed, bribed and bullied, cajoled, misdiagnosed and betrayed. So I'm still praying for a miracle. So during this next 24 hours, if any of you do choose to fast and pray, please remember Mummy T in your prayers, and Baby H and the other 2 children, and mothers everywhere that have wrongfully had their children stolen from them, and children from the care system, whether it's elite posh boarding schools, you know, gifted child music schools, ballet, dance, whatever, wherever children are away from family and in secretive environments with damaged lunatics that tell them they can masturbate each other and he's the headmaster and he'll ignore that. Children are in danger. So I'll check in again soon. This was just a quick one. God bless. Angela Paradisney, Angie Paradisney, Facebook, YouTube, and angelascashes.org.